When something blocks your way on the road of life, take a detour. Here I was in more trouble than usual, looking desperately for a detour. I didn't find one. I drew myself up and over the balcony, then turned back to grasp Zophie's hands. Her flesh was cool to the touch, not cold, not like a corpse. Not yet, but noticeably cooler than my own. I made sure my weapons, 2 short swords and a dagger, were still with me, then quietly coiled my cord and grapnel, while Zophie caught her breath. The tower had been built on a hill, and we were 3 floors up, high enough to see beyond the manicured noble estate, to the tangle of streets that made up the merchant district. Zophie studied the vastness of lights in the night sky. The red star Krev, home of the gods, shone to the northwest of the waning moon. I was more concerned with things closer to home. The starlight illuminated double doors of polished silver, worked with lines of ancient, elegant script and obscure symbols. I covered the cleverly concealed lock and went to work navigating the wards. Locks are my specialty. A few artful flicks of the wrist, and the bolt opened with a well-oiled click. I used my fingertips to push one door enough to peer in. No guards. I entered and gestured for Zophie to join me. The domed chamber dripped with luxury. There were 2 couches upholstered in silk, a few overstuffed pillows, and a bronze tripod-mounted telescope. Painted walls and ceiling created the illusion of being in a meadow. Tall green grass and a dark blue evening sky, complete with gemstones for stars that twinkled in the lamplight. The matriarchs are rich and like to live indulgently. They alone had the blood-born ability to wield sorcery. Some, like Magda Ondemir, the mistress of this tower, even claimed to have transcended mortality to join the ranks of the undying. Vampires, revenants, liches. I was mortal through and through, a pretty boy trying to provide for his overtaxed family up in North Finger, and find the quickest route to a comfortable retirement. I have allies who keep me safe from the kind of untimely death that plagues those in my chosen profession, but no one is safe from the enchantments of a sorceress like Zophie, especially when she was hot on the trail of some uncertain treasure that lay in another matriarch's lair. Of all the places in the city she could have forced me to break into, this was the most troubling. An archway opened onto a dimly lit narrow corridor lined with slim white pillars that followed the tower's exterior curve. Zophie tugged on my armor, and I stopped. She whispered a word of power and waved a small white hand. The floor tiles I was about to step on glowed green, revealing an intricate pattern that faded, collapsed. A ward, carefully placed by the tower's owner, now casually unwoven by Zophie. She tucked shoulder-length hair behind her ears and then nudged me to go ahead. A human shield. A shadow grew from an archway up ahead, and I signaled for Zophie to stay back. I crept forward and peeked around the corner. The room was a library filled with dusty, leather-bound books and stacks of scroll cases. A guard in black leather with a cudgel swinging from his belt leaned against a desk. I winged a copper piece past him into the room, and it pinged against a bookshelf. He turned toward the sound, and I was on him in a flash. Strangling someone isn't quick, and it's not easy like in a stage play. It's ugly, and it takes time, but it's usually silent. I squeezed hard and tried not to think about the fact that this was just some poor slob doing his job. I'd have the shakes later, and a few nights of bad dreams, if I lived that long. But for right now, I tightened my grip and thought of my family. His kicks finally stopped, and I dragged the body into the shadows. I stepped back into the hall, motioning for Zophie. We entered a gallery with vibrant paintings of lush landscapes and approached the stairs. There was a canvas depicting a sunny pasture. Of all the paintings, this one was more striking than the rest, with realistically rendered clouds and birds that moved ever so slightly when seen from the corner of your eye. I knew what this was. enchanted artwork designed to transfix the mind of those who stared at it too long. But I said nothing, hoping Sophie would be drawn into it. My silence was rewarded with a piercing headache and a loss of balance. The effect doubled with every beat of my heart until I gripped the staircase banister, reeling. Sophie had laid a Kess spell on me to keep me in line. In failing to mention the painting, I had tipped my hand, and now she knew I could not be trusted. I pointed at the painting and whispered through gritted teeth, "Avert your eyes." She did, and we quietly descended the steps side by side. "How did you know about the hungry painting?" She had a direct, rapid style of speaking, even in whisper, and an odd contrast to her mousy looks. "The rumor mill at the taverns keep me informed." It was the truth, more or less, and even though it was not the main reason I knew so much about that particular painting, the lie of omission earned me a wave of pain and lightheadedness. Considering the rather delicate nature of our mission, I was considering releasing you from the Kess. But now, I think I'll keep it in place. The next best thing to a loyal heart is a loyal mind. "What choice do I have?" "Precisely," said she. "However, I also need you to be able to think for yourself. If you know any other obscure details about the traps in this place, warn me." "I'll try, but I don't even know what we're after." She looked me up and down, assessing me. "We're looking for a weapon, a dagger, called Rack. Once I have it, and we're safely away, the Kess will be lifted." "And?" "I like you, Merrick, though I wonder if you have my best interests at heart," she said. "I don't like surprises. However, I could cast a fresh spell, something more long-term. Would you like that? You could be my loyal bodyguard, living in luxury at my side. Only if you fail me or bore me, I would drink you and savor every drop." She flashed a crooked little smile. I smiled back. Merrick isn't my real name, though many people know me as Merrick. It's as good a name as any. I wasn't sure if that line about ending my life was a threat or a jape, and I didn't take to it kindly. There was a rumor that her house, House Lucas, had diluted vampire blood running in the veins. In any case, it was my experience that people who jest about doing you harm eventually try to make good on their threats. In other circumstances, that line would have earned her my hands around her throat. I let myself meditate on that, burning. If I let that thought become action, though, the Kess would cripple me, and while I struggled in unthinkable pain, she could blast me with a spell. No, it was wiser to bide my time. Maybe Sophie really was cleverer than Magda and the other matriarchs. I didn't disagree with the strongest ruling, at least not in theory. Sometimes the quickest road to your goal happens to be the road you're on. Beyond the staircase was a cavernous reception area. The floor was black metallic tile, reflecting dozens of dancing amber flames that flickered atop candles and brass lamps. The walls and ceilings were of polished black stone like the tower's exterior, and looked like they had been designed by a morbid physician. A rib-bone motif gave texture to the curved walls, and the support pillars were suggestive of spinal columns. "Hold," warned Sophie. "Remove your weapons. Take off any clothes with metal in them, too, even a single buckle or button. I've read accounts about this part of the tower where Magna holds her gatherings for the Tanja." I played dumb and gave her a quizzical look. She sighed. "The matriarchs that head up each noble house, idiot. In any case, this floor is magnetically enchanted. The magic is fused into every tile, and I can't dispel them all. If you take another step, you'll be pinned to the ground." With her scolding still ringing in my ears, I took off my studded leather coat, belt, boots, and quietly unbuckled my weapons. Sophie sat upon the floor, removed the rings from her fingers, pulled off her boots, and discarded two exquisite-looking daggers with blades that shone like mirrors. A third dagger was sheathed horizontally across the small of her back, the white pommel carved in the likeness of a skull. I stared in silence, wondering when the Kess would flare up. She patted the sheath and said, "Weapons don't have to be made of steel, especially daggers. They're not workhorses like swords. Rack is fossilized bone, like this one I took from my grandmother when she, finally died." Did you? That's the problem with long-lived families, Merrick. The old won't adapt to new ways or accept someone younger and stronger to lead. First time is the hardest. She'd been on her deathbed for years. I was her assistant, waiting on her hand and foot. She loved her research, and I dutifully retrieved every ancient book or scroll which she called for. It soon dawned on me that her failing health had been a false rumor, which she had started, and that wasn't her only deception. The spells she'd been teaching me were toothless, illusions and minor enchantments, nothing a house matriarch would find useful. I'm sure Grandmother thought she was being clever, keeping herself safe. I'm a fast reader, though. I found what I needed in one of the volumes she had me fetch. I took a chance and read the spell aloud. Her ancient flesh collapsed like a squeezed citron. What remained of her life's blood burst from her pores and flowed across the air into me. Now I'm matriarch and ready for the next step. I'm here to cut Ondermere's strings. It's rumored Magda keeps her soul locked within Rack. Once I have the dagger in my possession, I'll draw out the soul and destroy it. Sophie held up a single manicured finger. Even if the rumor proves false, and Magda's soul is hidden elsewhere, I'll have proven I was strong enough to steal her prized possession. Either way, the days of Lukas being a minor house are over. Her confidence annoyed me, and I tried to undermine it without provoking the effects of the kiss. What makes you think another ambitious young woman from House Vortan or Opala won't hunt you down and do the same? Ha! I'm more resourceful than those fools. Besides, I'll have you for counterintelligence, willing or not. So, you aren't going to kill me when we're done here. It would be a waste. She tucked a few loose strands of her hair behind her ears again, fixed me with a dark-eyed gaze. There are leaders and followers, Merrick. The sooner you realize you're one of the latter, the happier we'll both be. Come. We left our bits of metal at the base of the stairs. I followed, unarmed, across the cold floor. This area of the tower was filled with silence. We came to a grand table with 13 high-backed chairs. Next to it was an alcove which displayed the treasure Sophie was after, the legendary dagger, Rack, unsheathed, resting on a pair of skeletal human hands mounted on the wall. The blade itself was long and delicate, its hilt sized for an artist's hand, an elegant design from long ago, when something other than brutality had been the currency of power. Sophie and I had come to the end of our adventure. There was no sign of Magda, and I wasn't sure what that meant for me. Sophie chuckled at my unhappy expression. She was full of herself and greedy. I didn't hate her, though. I admired her. Someone who had seen so few winters engineering such a risky power grab. It was impressive. Sophie let out a gleeful little giggle and grasped the hilt of the ancient blade. This was my moment. I did two things at once. Closed my left hand over her mouth, and with my right hand drew the bone dagger from her back sheath. I thrust the blade into the base of her skull. The kiss enveloped me like a swarm of hell wasps. It was like I had driven the dagger into both our skulls. It wasn't my first dance with the spell, though, and I was able to maintain control of my muscles for the briefest of moments. I made the most of it, twisting the dagger around with all my strength until I was certain I had ruined her. Rack fell from lifeless fingers. Her body crumpled like a puppet with strings cut. The pain finally overwhelmed me, brought me to one knee. Blood trickled from my nose, eyes, and ears. The agony was unbearable. I let out a scream. When the last twitch of life had left the body of the sorceress, though, my torment lessened by degrees until it was only a sharp pain, then mere discomfort. I was shivering, exhausted yet. At last, I had control of my body again. I barely had the strength to make a fist. I coughed and pulled out a cloth to wipe the blood and tears from my face. A blurry form emerged from the shadows. "Hello, my darling." Magda. She knelt and held my trembling body.
I knew Sophie would force you to bring her here. You did your part beautifully, my dear. I suppose she never even suspected a wrinkled old hag like me had already claimed you.
Hag? Not quite. Magda was older, but still quite attractive. I buried my face in her neck, fumbling for something to say. Don't be ridiculous. I closed my eyes and breathed in her familiar scent. My legs were unsteady. I stood, but only with her assistance. You're stunning, as always. I ran my fingers through her silky black hair with silver streaks at her temple, and looked into dark green eyes. How did you know I could stop her?
I didn't,
she said.
Rack is a valuable relic, but it doesn't contain my soul. That is something I let others believe, so they think me beyond killing.
She didn't know what she was after, I admitted.
I do, said Magda. Why don't you stay a while? We'll celebrate.
No enchantments? She indicated her rival's body with a haughty thrust of her chin.
Look at what happened to the last woman who tried to ensorcel you.
Sophie had been right about one thing. There were leaders and followers, and I was one of the latter. I'm sorry I had to kill one of your guards. It was Thomas, I think.
And I'm sorry you had to go through that ordeal.
She caressed my jaw.
Young women always give more trust than they should to a beautiful face. You were with her several nights, yes? Tell me, did she have any redeeming qualities?
Her hands, I admitted. Magda's lips curved into a smile.
It's time I updated my little shrine, don't you think? Severed flesh can be magically preserved for decades, a little ghoulish, I admit. Though the next time I host the Tanja, they'll recognize those soft white hands. And I want everyone to know what became of her.
No wonder Magda was one of the longest reigning matriarchs. Sometimes the quickest road to your goal is the one you're on.
I think it's time you and I talked about a partnership,
said she.
I have plans for you, if you'll have me.
I will. I kissed her sweet lips. I didn't have a mathematical mind like hers. My thoughts would never be burdened by the complexities of necromancy or enchantment spells. I knew how to survive, though, and the best way to do that in this city was with Magda watching my back.